How wild is that? And give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled. And the woman which you saw is that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. What is the city that reigns over the kings of the earth? You see that word, which reigneth over the kings of the earth? He's speaking to Rome in an idiomatic way. John had to write things in a way, not only was he inspired to write this way, but also in the stroke of genius of writing in puns and idioms, you're able to call out the Roman Empire for what it is, a possessor of evil things, okay? Without saying, yeah, Rome's, the possessor of evil things, and then end up not getting these letters sent out from the island of Patmos, okay? So by him writing it this way, which is a stroke of genius, writing it this way, the Roman Empire thinks John's just a crazy guy. Like, have you read these writings of this woman that rules the world? And man, he's crazy, And so it's a stroke of genius. So he gets away with it. However, any prolific reader of the Old Testament marvels at the intelligent design that's discovered in the book of Revelation. And you're just like, wow, John, wow, God, wow, you guys, great teamwork. Good job. And praise be to God for faithful followers of Christ on the earth like John that didn't give in, okay? So, the mother of all harlots, I want to go back to this. Okay, the first world leader to show up on the scene in the book of Genesis, his name is Nimrod, okay? His queen, Semiramis, they gave birth to a son named Tammuz, and they started all the traditions, a lot of the Babylonian traditions that we see in a lot of the holidays, like the Yule log, like around Christmas time. The whole Yule log thing, that goes back to the early Babylonian traditions. Astarte, the Easter stuff, the golden egg and all this stuff. So those are Babylonian traditions that kind of crept its way into the church. Well, Nimrod was the first world leader, Tower of Babylon, okay, this is where we get the word Babylon from, the root word, Babel, okay. They started all these traditions, okay, so this early origins, right, she is the mother of all harlots, so early origins of all paganism and all traditions that lead people away from God has its roots in Babylon. Well, how do I word this? Semiramis, her name is also, she also goes by another name, Thyatira. And this is where the city of Thyatira was named after, okay? Well, inside the city of Thyatira, if you read the letter to the Christians there, those that don't pass your tests, those that don't, overcome, you got to go through the great tribulation. So there's a group here that's warned, if you don't learn how to overcome, this Jezebel entity, this woman entity, is kind of idiomatic, if you will, as of Babylon. And if you give in to her ways of fornication, then you're going to be going through the great tribulation. I don't know how all that works. The Lord's got it all figured out, but it says that if you don't overcome, you're going to go through great tribulation that comes over the whole world concept. So it's like you got to make sure you keep yourself clean, right, and pure. So the church before Thyatira, if you remember, was Pergamum, Balaam. Remember, Balaam in the church age phase represents the married church. In the 300s, it began the Pergamum phase, okay, with Constantine. You had the 300s and 400s where Christians begin to marry the practices of the world, and pagan traditions, so that, while they practice, let's say the Yule log and the winter solstice and all this, we'll celebrate the birth of Christ. And in one way, it's like, while you do your thing, we'll do our thing. And as we can do our best to convert you, you can do it this way. However, by marrying, what happens is there's such a letting down of the guard, if you will, by becoming married and just, oh, well, you give room for compromise. And if you're not careful at that moment in your walk with Christ, once you give over to compromise, it's easy to then open the door for the influence of Jezebel or Babylon to come in and to start to rule and call the shots. So preceding Thyatira was Pergamum. So you have this, the mother, so if you want to track your way back up to the mother, you start with compromise. How crazy is that? How wow, amazing stroke of genius, the intelligent design, even within the letters of the churches, to human history, to even right here we see with Babylon and the way it's unfolding. So let's jump into these graphs here. And I want to give absolute props to the work of Chuck Meisler and Cornelia House. His breakdown of this, and I'm using his slides here to help break down what does all this mean about the 7 and the 8 and the 10 and all what have you, okay? We're going to call this Satan's super kingdoms. So Satan's super kingdoms. Here on the left you have the kingdoms Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome, and then this Rome too, if you will. Well, this is the understanding of what shows up in the 10-horned beast, the revised Roman Empire, okay? And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Okay, remember in chapter 12, we have this beast, okay, the 10 horns and 7 heads. This is also revealed to us in the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation 13. And this next slide here, Satan's super kingdoms, okay, the 7 super kingdoms. In Daniel chapter 4, over here to the left, Daniel 4 reveals, beginning in Babylon, remember Daniel was part of the Babylonian captivity, there was 4 system, okay, the big image, right, that gets crushed, and the entrance of the kingdom of God, the rock that comes and continues to grow, that's going to crush the 10 toes. Okay, those 4 kingdoms, right, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Those are the 4. Now, when the kingdom comes and strikes and destroys all this, okay, that kingdom is the kingdom of Christ. Christ is the stone that the builders rejected that continues to grow, and it's increased, presence of peace and kingdom. There shall be no end, etc., etc. Okay, that's from Daniel chapter 4. Revelation 17:10 that we just said is there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, 1 is, and the other is not yet to come. And when he comes, he must continue for a short space. So let's break this down. The 7 kings, okay, here is the 7 kings, okay. And that time when when the system happens and everything's made manifest, these are the revealing of the 7 kings. The Egyptian Empire, Assyrian Empire, Babylonian, okay, Persia, okay, all right. All these are going to be at play. They're in the Middle East, okay, Europe and Middle East and all this is going to be at play, all right. The 5 that are fallen, now when John writes this, who are the previous 5 that are fallen? Well, from Greece backwards, because remember, John lived during the time of the Roman Empire. So the 5 that are fallen are the 5 preceding empires. And 1 is. This is John currently writing in 90 AD. He's currently there in the Roman Empire. The other is not yet come. What's this? The revised Roman Empire. Rome Part 2, if you will, okay? This is the 10-horned system, okay? So, now verse 11 of 17 says, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7th, and goes into perdition." Well, he's of the 7th. Well, he's of the 7th, so he's one of these. Which one is he? Well, if the beast is not, okay, so beforehand, okay, yet he's of the 8th, he's part of the revised. Now remember that there's another horn that shows up that usurps 3. Remember from Daniel chapter 7, okay? So he's the little horn that comes up, usurps the 3. Now he's of the 7th, so he's part of this grouping of 7. It goes into perdition. So this is the Antichrist, or the son of perdition, the lawless one, okay? So who is he of? Where is it? Well, if he's part of the ones that are not, Isaiah chapter 10, my conjecture is this: he's from Assyria. This is where he comes out of, because Isaiah chapter 10, verses 5 and 6, it says that the Assyrian, who is the club of God's wrath, this is idiomatic, this is pointing to, okay, this pun, this picture, okay, of God's wrath, this club of God's wrath. It's the same wrath of God that all these things will be administered through. So he's the Assyrian. So friend, this is how I believe that this is all broken down, and how you can wrap your head around this great mystery, this great enigma.